Tēnā koutou katoa and Harry Mai, and thanks to all for joining us this evening for our Light Rail virtual event. My name is Tracy Ryan and I'm the Managing Director for Oricon. I'd just like to first, if we kind of start, there was two emails today which made me reflect and pause for a moment, and I just wanted to share both of those with you today. One is, as you know, there's a campaign which has been around for many, many years, which started in Australia around Are You OK? And today it did make me reflect when I got that email from my colleagues in Australia to ask me that question, am I okay? And as we all know, we've had the past 18 months have been very, very challenging and have been really, really tough for many of us. And as we've seen also for the last couple of weeks, and I think it's really highlighted the importance to stay connected and to stay supporting one another around us. And as we've changed this to a virtual event rather than being together in Auckland, I think it just should remind us of that little message and a very simple message to kind of check in on one another and ask, are you okay? And I think it's important to trust your gut sometimes, and maybe for us to reflect at the end of this event to say, is there someone that you'd like to reach out to say, hey, how are you going? Are you okay? And I think it's important that we still to do it now that we've really gone through a virtual world of where we are at the moment. The other thing I'd just like to make and be able to mention around an email which came in from our friends at Mates in Construction. Tomorrow actually is World Suicide Prevention Day. And last year, our friends in Mates in Construction ran a really, really great campaign out on site where they raised the flags in support and also in remembrance of the individuals and loved ones that we've lost through suicide. This year, they've asked us to come together and to actually light a candle in our windows tomorrow at 8 p.m. as the world comes together to actually remember our loved ones that are lost and the survivors of suicide. So I just thought I'd actually share that amongst this group today and just remember that moment at 8 o'clock tomorrow night. But let's just get into the event itself today. I'd like to just really reflect and just talk a little bit around what we're going to be talking around today. Auckland Light Rail will be one of the most transformational projects New Zealand has ever seen. It will reshape our city, giving Aucklanders greater transport choices, and also driving lower carbon emissions and uplifting communities by increasing access to jobs, housing, education, and other amenities. And I'm sure we're going to hear much more of that this afternoon from our guest speakers and the aspirations, outcomes, and benefits that could be achieved from this project, which will be felt from generations to come. And I know there is a lot of interest, and I'm sure there'll be many, many questions which will come through. Auckland has had the privilege of delivering a range of light rail and mass transit projects around the world, including in the Gold Coast, Parramatta, Newcastle, Singapore, Hong Kong, and Mauritius, and some which we'll hear from my colleagues who are joined us from Sydney later on today. And in every case, these projects have unlocked wide-ranging opportunities for cities and communities that inhabit. And I've experienced this actually myself firsthand in the way light rail projects can transform cities. From my experience on the Lewis line, when I was working back in Dublin in the late 1990s, I actually worked through the inquiry of Bord Planola and also some of the consentings of the Lewis line back in Dublin in the late 19s, early 2000s. And like Auckland, Dublin once had an extensive and well-used tram system with a peak close to around 100 kilometres of active lines, which were heavily used. It was profitable. It had great passenger facilities and also had advanced technology with a near full electrification completed by 1901. And this ran right up to 1949 when the last tram actually got cancelled in Dublin. And the reason why, as we saw in many cities around the world in that time, that we relied very heavily on the private vehicles, and buses became the future of transport. And at that time, unfortunately and very sadly, the tram systems were removed and very similar around the world. Around the late 90s, Dublin was facing similar challenges in Auckland is now. Growth pressures, congestion from heavy car dependency, and a need for sustainable transport options. So reviving light rail or mass transport really unlocked the city, improving accessibility and driving urban development. And in fact, it's a little bit like coming full circle. And some of the tracks for the Lewis line ran over areas where those previous tram tracks of the past have once been used. And up to now, I think prior to COVID hitting Ireland and back in 2019, about 41 million users are using the tram systems in Dublin today, which averages around 120,000 people per day. And for someone who's experienced that, it truly has transformed Dublin into a global city that it is today. So now it's Auckland's turn again to embark on that journey and our journey towards light rail. So it's a real privilege to have and to have Tommy Parker, Lee Ayton, and Amanda Harlan here this evening from the Auckland Light Rail team to share how the project is progressing and what the next steps that we will expect. And I'm sure you're going to have lots of questions. So around 5:40, and we will be opening up the floor for Q&A. So you can use the panel on the right-hand side of your screen to type in any questions that you might have. And I imagine, and I believe many have already started to come in, so please keep them coming throughout the presentation. I'm now going to hand you over, because obviously tonight, at Auckland, we're delivering this event in sponsorship and in partnership with Infrastructure New Zealand. So I'm now going to hand over to Claire Edmondson, who's the General Manager of Infrastructure New Zealand, to share a few words, and she will act as your MC for this evening. So Claire, I'll hand over to you.
Thanks, Tracy. So tēnā koutou katoa, and welcome to our Infrastructure New Zealand event on Auckland Light Rail, which is kindly sponsored by Auckland. So we're grateful to have Lee Orton, Tommy Parker and Amanda Harlan from the Auckland Light Rail Group here with us virtually tonight to hear about our project is progressing, what the timelines are and what we can expect. So Auckland Light Rail is proposed to run from Auckland City Centre to Mangere and is intended to provide the backbone for future light rail to the North and Northwest Auckland. The government established the Light Rail Group earlier this year as part of a fresh start. The group has been charged with developing a business case and making recommendations for Auckland's light rail. The group consists of Waka, Kotahi, New Zealand Transport Agency, the Ministry of Transport, Auckland Council, Auckland Transport, Kainga Ora and whenua. So a little bit about our speakers. So Lee is the chair of the Auckland Light Rail Board and has extensive local government experience with a particular background in planning, infrastructure and transport. He has been involved in issues at national, regional and local levels in New Zealand. Lee served as the Chief Executive at Manukau City Council up until the formation of the new Auckland Council in 2010, and he is the former President and inaugural Fellow of the New Zealand Planning Institute, and in November 2009 received a Distinguished Service Award for his significant contribution over many years to the image and practice of planning. He's also on a number of boards. Tommy Parker is the Project Director for Auckland Light Rail and is the Australasian consultancy lead for the global firm Arup. He has nearly 30 years experience in transport, urban planning and engineering in New Zealand and the United Kingdom. His previous roles included General Manager Infrastructure at Fletcher Construction and 13 years working at Waka Kotahi, including as Group Manager for Highways and Network Operations. Tommy currently serves on the board of Auckland Transport. He has also chaired the New Zealand Construction Industry Zero Harm Group and North Canterbury Transport Infrastructure Recovery, the Recovery Alliance to restore infrastructure following the Kainga Ora earthquake. So Amanda Harlan is a lead growth and spatial advisor for Auckland Council. She has over 20 years experience in strategic urban planning, specialising in growth and spatial planning for Auckland. Prior to the formation of Auckland Council, Amanda led Manukau City Council's growth management approach and master planning for town centres. Her role with Auckland Council has seen significant contributions to the development of the Auckland Plan Development Strategy, as well as planning for growth in the future urban areas of Auckland. More recently, Amanda has played a key role in leading urban and spatial planning advice on behalf of Auckland Council for several key transport projects. So we welcome them all here today. And so Lee, Tommy and Amanda will speak for about 20 minutes, and then we'll have about a 20-minute Q&A session. So over to you, guys.
Okay. Thank you, Claire and Tracy. Lee Orton here. Kia ora koutou katoa, malale alele, which is it's Tongan Language Week in New Zealand. So I just reflect on that. Look, thank you for the opportunity of presenting this evening on this, as indicated, a pretty significant project for Auckland and indeed for New Zealand. I just want to spend a little bit of time around the governance structure, which has been referred to. But first and foremost, my role is as the independent chair of the establishment unit. I was appointed in 31st of March this year. I report to 4 sponsors. That is the Minister of Transport, the Honourable Michael Wood, the Minister of Finance and our Deputy Prime Minister, the Honourable Grant Robertson, the Mayor of Auckland, Phil Goff, and the Deputy Mayor, Councillor Bill Cashmore. And I think that's significant in the sense that this is both a central government and a local government project, and they are my sponsors, which we report to regularly. They give us guidance, give me guidance in terms of the key issues of the project. So just turning to the slide in front of you, it was mentioned the governance structure and the board. I do want to run just through it in terms of the names, which will be relevant, particularly to the New Zealand audience. But we could start at the top. Waka Kotahi, so the CEO, Nicole Rosie is on the board. The Ministry of Transport, the CEO of the ministry, Peter Mercy, is on the board. Kainga Ora, Katja Lenz, who's an urban designer for Kainga Ora, is on the board. Auckland Transport, Shane Ellison. In the Auckland Council, we actually have Jim Stubbock, who is the CEO, alongside Councillor Chris Darby, who is head of the Planning Committee, which is an influential committee of the Council. And we also have Mangere Watson, who represents 6 local boards. So in Auckland, we have the Auckland Council, and we have 21 local boards, of which 6 are directly involved with this route. We also have mana whenua representatives. We have Nārima Blair from Ngāti Whātua Ōrākei and Karen Wilson, Te Akatau Wāhua. And they bring quite a critical element to this project. So what we've been tasked to do by government is to progress an indicative business case for the city centre to Mangere. So it is the first part of a longer process, and Tommy will outline the sort of the next phase where we move into the detailed business case. But we are tasked to progress that, to present to the Ministry of Transport at the end of September. So we're getting pretty close to some key decisions and obviously writing up the report with the intention of going to the Cabinet in November, mid-November. That business case will advise on the delivery entity options, and again we can cover that through this presentation. To set up mana whenua partnership, so this is about early informing and early engagement with recommendations in terms of the project for the next detail phase of mana whenua, its involvement in this project, and importantly to engage with stakeholders and communities. We have taken a view that we needed to inform, engage, particularly the communities along the proposed route, which is fairly broad, but definable from the city centre through to Mangere and through to the airport. And so we've actually gone deep into that, and I'd have to say very encouraged by that engagement. So for example, engagements in places like Mangere, which typically don't get involved in the normal media, the normal processes that a lot of the population is engaged with. We've been able to reach into that community through Samoan radio, through Tongan, through the churches, etc. So we've had a deep engagement in those communities and got fantastic feedback in terms of their aspirations in terms of this project. And that's the indicative business case is to enable decisions by the Cabinet in terms of the mode, which we'll talk about, the route, which we'll talk about, funding and financing, and the delivery entity, as I've mentioned before. I just want to make one comment, and it was referred to in the introduction. This is about a transit mode which has been built in a number of places, many cities around the world, Dublin being a great example. It is about nonetheless, and the outcomes from this are about how we shape our city for 30, 40 and beyond generations. This is a long-term project, and I guess as a professional planner, that's one of the things that excites me around this project. And Amanda Harlan will talk about that shortly. So next, so this is the program. So as I mentioned, we set up and appointed in April. We began the partner stakeholder engagement, community engagement in June, and that's carried right through till the end of August. We had to, with level 4 lockdown here, we had to quickly change mode, but it was a very successful nonetheless in terms of online interaction. So a lot of community focused listening sessions, events. We've all been to the various markets around Auckland, including the minister, including the mayor, including most of the board, if not all of them, at some stage during July and August. So getting community feedback and insights to include into the business case. And so that's as we're up to. As I say, this month is about key decisions and putting the report through to the Ministry of Transport. We'll talk about at the end of this presentation in terms of the next stage, but by that stage we'll have had a presentation from Tommy Parker, who's going to start with the next slides, and then we'll have Amanda Harlan talk about the urban form. So Tommy, turn over to you.
Thanks, Lee, and kia ora. Good evening, everybody. Great to be here having this conversation. So yeah, as Lee says, we've been working for a few months now to progress the business case and the social license. And really one of the key aspects, as anyone that's involved in business case knows, it's about defining the issues that we're looking to solve and the opportunities that we can reach. And fundamentally, this project is about responding to Auckland's growth. You won't need me to tell you, you'll have seen the stats that Auckland is growing fast, has grown very fast, and will continue to do so. There's high demand for growth in our city, and so being able to respond to that, and in terms of both, as Lee said, both the transport response and how that informs the wider urban form and city shaping response is a fantastic opportunity. Go to the next slide, please, Jeff. So yeah, defining what the problem is that we're looking to solve, very important for every business case, and forms the foundation of the project that allows us to take it forward. So with the growth that Auckland is experiencing, there were 3 problem statements that we're looking to respond to. One is the increased congestion. We're seeing Auckland's becoming famous for its congestion. And now we're seeing it's not just car congestion, we're getting bus congestion as well, and that is disrupting travel times, threatening investment and the quality of life. That high reliance on private vehicles is adversely affecting the climate. So we have a growing pollution and emissions issue, and we all know the challenges in front of us in terms of climate change and how we address the emissions issue inherent in our current transport and land use patterns. And finally, the third one is around our communities and strengthening the need to strengthen and build strong communities within the city and that have access to public transport. So we're seeing along the course of this route a huge difference in equality in terms of access to public transport. So some of the suburbs that this route goes through have the lowest level of public transport accessibility, and quite often they're the lowest socioeconomic groups. So what we're seeing, people that are most reliant on the private car are the ones who can least afford to run them. So those are the three issues. So we've got a congestion, a capacity issue, we've got an emissions problem, and we've got a community growth and service for public transport issue. So if we address these problems through this project, what will we see? Well, we'll see enable increased urban density and economic growth. Tracy in the introduction mentioned about 1 scheme, but we'll see schemes across the world which have led to huge urban uplift and economic growth, economic stimulus. We'll see increased community well-being, as I was saying, greater access to jobs, greater access to opportunities, lower travel times, lower commuting times, and those benefits. We'll see an improvement in the environment and that need to decarbonise and reduce the pollution, and then that improved public transport accessibility and more equal distribution of public transport accessibility across the city. So that's the basis of our business case. What we've also been out is to start to look at options and to start to talk to the communities about options. A lot of you will be aware that a lot of work has been done on this this project before, and there've been a number of initiatives. But as I think as Claire mentioned, this is a fresh start. So, and what we're really looking to do is build that social mandate to really get people to understand the issues, the trade-offs, and the opportunities. So we did look, we did a long list of options, over 35 different routes and modes served in this corridor, and we were quite quickly, through multi-criteria analysis, able to get it down to a couple of key modes that we've been consulting on. One we're calling modern tram, the surface road running option. Most of you will be familiar with, seen in the Gold Coast and Melbourne, but running integrated with the urban streetscape and with high number of stations every sort of 500 metres along, so a slower end-to-end route, but serving more stops. The other option we've been looking at is a light metro, so segregated from the streetscape. In this example, and shown in the picture, by a tunnel below ground. This is a cut and cover tunnel option that we've used as an example, and then we've been looking and discussing the trade-offs between those different modes. I would say that we've also, for those tunnel enthusiasts amongst you, not looking just at cut and cover options, we have broadened the investigation looking at board tunnel options as well. Obviously, these have different outcomes and they also have different costs associated. So I probably don't need to go through all of this. We kind of touched on those, but a number of different trade-offs and different opportunities for the two light metro or modern tram options. And when we come on to urban form, obviously you do get a different urban form. With modern trams tends to be more corridor development with more regular stops, whereas light metro, get more development around key stations and nodal points. Next slide, please. So, as Lee said in his introduction, this is one line in a future planned number of light rail lines within the city, which reflects the ATAP plan that was approved earlier, and that's the strategy that we're working. So we have a line planned for the northwest and for the northern. So the question is, why did we start with the city centre to Mangere line first? And primarily it is related to the opportunities related to urban form. So this line runs from the two biggest economic generators in the city, so the CBD and the airport and the airport precinct. So high levels of economic activity at either end of the line, with opportunities to grow jobs and houses. So some big numbers, 170,000 jobs, 21,000 new homes. That's the currently forecast. We're looking at how that relates. 17% of Auckland's population and 33% of the job growth will take place along this route, with the opportunity for brownfield development at scale. And land owned by the Crown through Kainga Ora, opportunities to develop that at scale. So those are the opportunities that made this route the first cab off the rank in terms of the light rail network. Actually, Jeff, we're going to go on to the next one. I'll just talk straight to the next slide, which basically covers the same. So look, I'll just take you through the corridor. We're looking at quite a broad corridor with a number of different options, and we've had a lot of conversations around this with a number of different different stakeholders. If we start in the, as I say, what we're trying to do in this phase, in the indicative business phase, understand the trade-offs, understand the opportunities, and how do we maximise the benefits in order to justify the business case. All the detailed design, a lot of the master planning, a lot of the work will follow in the detailed business case, but this is looking for the core justifications. So some of the issues, where do we start? There's a big desire to start within Wynyard Quarter and serve Wynyard Quarter with a station. This is significant because, as I said, we're wanting to connect this route across the harbour in the future, and work with the future harbour crossing opportunities. So how we where we locate the station and the opportunity within Wynyard Quarter has a big bearing on that. Then through the city centre, the key issue, and you won't be surprised to hear this, is around disruption and the extent of business disruption. And you'll know there's a very live debate around CRL on disruption and small businesses, and that's been very top of the conversation of which does tend to drive towards the tunnel and the segregated options. Also looking at the opportunities for station locations with a tunnel option. You can have more flexibility about where you can locate the stations and those centres for future economic development. One of the key benefits we've seen on the tunnel option is to have a station in the learning zone. So between Auckland AUT and Auckland University, you can have a university precinct, and the modelling shows that the university station would actually be the second busiest on the route. So very high demand for the access to education. Coming further down, we come through the Dominion Junction area, which is again high opportunity for intense development and land development. And then we have looking at options down both Sandringham Road and Dominion Road, both at grade and below ground. And they're different trade-offs and different opportunities. There are actually different land uses. There are different planning constraints, the different zonings between the two different routes, and there are also different interchange options. Going down Sandringham does allow you to interchange at Kingsland, and as much as possible in terms of making these benefits, we're looking at how this route interacts with the rest of the rapid transit network. So that with heavy rail, ferries, and rapid bus networks to make sure that we're optimising the total system, and Kingsland is an opportunity there. As I said before, there are different land development opportunities in the different corridors, and a lot of land owned by Kainga Ora that we're looking to optimise how that develops. South of coming down to the isthmus from Mount Roskill, the route progresses along State Highway 20 corridor, where there is sufficient width to allow rail in that corridor, and then really the lower southern part of the route, how you serve the town centres. So Mount Roskill, Onehunga, Mangere Bridge, Favona and Mangere. Opportunities to either go past the town centres, which is cheaper, and to stay in the motorway corridor, less disruption, less property take, but obviously losing some of the benefits of urban regeneration, urban form. So the opportunity also exists to go through the town centres and locate the stations in prominent community centre locations. And interestingly, in the engagement that we've undertaken, strong preference for the latter, to have a very prominent rail in the community serving and as a basis, as a catalyst for regeneration of those communities. Also with Onehunga, of course, there is a heavy rail connection there that we'd be looking for, platform to platform connections. There would seem to be the obvious driver for that. And then finally, connecting into the airport precinct. Look, the airport precinct's high growth and opportunity of employment. A lot of the perception of this line, and the public perception at the start, was that this was kind of a fast rail between the CBD and Auckland Airport for people going on the holidays. As you'll have seen as we go past, that's not the core problem statement that we're trying to solve. That's not the purpose. What this is about is getting those opportunities. So for people in those areas, Onehunga and Mangere, to be able to access jobs at the airport quickly, reliably, huge opportunities to lift economic opportunity there. Also, of course, transport planners be aware there's an airport to Botany rapid bus coming in from the east, and again we're seeing great benefits in terms of interchange between this rapid transit service and that one, and those are the kind of points that see that kind of lift, but also serving the airport as well. The airport requires, to meet its future plans, a significant modal shift, about 30% modal shift, and this would obviously greatly assist that objective. Jeff, I think. Yeah, and look, this is my final slide, just really saying that this is more than a transport project. It is around integrating transport and land use together to get the optimum view. I know I'm going to get asked about the costs, and I'm not going to give out any figures at this stage, I'm afraid, but never to say the cost will be a big, whichever option we go for will be a big scary number. So in order to justify that investment, and in order to convince Treasury to invest, we need to show that we can optimise the benefits and really get a strong return for that investment. And that's about looking at the transport, economic and land use and community benefits as one collective package to really release Auckland's potential. And that's what's so exciting about this project. Now I'd like to hand over to Amanda to talk a little bit more about that urban development.
Thanks, Tommy. I'd just like to reiterate the points Tommy made. This is a huge opportunity for Auckland to realise the potential of light rail investment for Auckland's growth. And I guess an additional point to what Tommy was talking about in terms of the urban context and why light rail in this line for this route is around, I guess, the permanent nature of this investment can help to stimulate private and other public investment. It sends a clear signal to the market. It's a chosen public investment. This is where investment is going and follow. So to shape the future of Auckland's growth. So in terms of the indicative business case phase, we were tasked with, I guess, answering three pretty fundamental questions around the potential urban development opportunity in this corridor with light rail investment. Another key issue that we've spent quite a lot of time talking about politically, but also within our project team, is that desired scale of growth. What is that? What does that look like? And how does that support the investment, and what level of investment? And how does that deliver quality urban transport outcomes in an integrated nature? And then, of course, just building the light rail, we know is not enough. What are the challenges to delivering urban change to overcome those? So next slide, please. This slide has been quite useful in terms of articulating that scale issue, what the opportunity and it's fair to say that Auckland is very much at the lower end of this, if you like to see this as a continuum of development and density. It shows the relationship between development and levels of intensification and scale and different modes. So Auckland is very much at the lower end of that scale, and it's starting to transition through to seeing much higher levels of density intensification in particular locations. We've seen a significant change since the Auckland Unitary Plan upzoned a lot of areas of Auckland. Around 80% of our consents that are coming through are in the existing urban area, and the majority of those consents are actually in the higher forms of, or typologies of intensification, higher end. So still seeing predominantly 4 or 5 story developments for apartments and a lot of terraces. And there's a significant step change that we need to make in order to see the levels of intensification that are consistent with the light rail and light metro investment. So what you can see from this slide is that that light rail and light metro are more akin to the Melbourne, Vancouver style development, which many of you I'm sure are familiar with. And at the much more extreme end of the scale, we're looking at, you know, a Singapore type of city or density correlating to a system, a much higher capacity rail system, such as the light metro plus. Now we're probably looking more at the Melbourne, Vancouver sort of style of intensification and corresponding investment. So I guess the key message here is that, you know, Auckland is changing. It's changing fast, but we still have quite a step change to go in terms of realising development that is supportive of a light rail and light metro investment. And this, I guess, out of the, you know, the thinking the broader long-term network, this corridor has the most, I guess, potential, is most ready to accommodate that kind of change. And yeah, it's a huge opportunity to make a difference and transform Auckland. I think that was my last slide. And to the next slide. Yeah, you'll finish off, Lee. Thank you.
Yes, I'll pick it up here. So introduce the indicative business case, which is in the blue at the start of this presentation. This is to inform the Cabinet, as I indicated. We are talking, and part of the advice to the in the business case, advice to the Cabinet as to the transition into the next stage. We are keen, and I'm pretty sure the government will be, to make sure that we can keep momentum on this project. It is important that we give confidence to the market that this project is going to proceed, and there's certainly every indication in terms of that from the government that it will do so. I think we can have a reasonable degree of confidence that this project will move into the next phase. So you can see there what that looks like, and you can ask Tommy during question time as to what the detailed business case, the more what that involves. But it does involve, you know, setting up the entity, doing the more detailed design, working through what it looks like in terms of the interface with the communities in terms of urban design, planning and consenting, and then obviously construction starting. We would anticipate in 2 to 3 years time. So I'll leave it there, and we're open for questions.
Okay, brilliant. Thanks for that, guys. And apologies for the sound quality there. Hopefully it's all working now. Hopefully we've fixed it. So, Tommy, as you mentioned, you're not going to go into costs and you're not going to go into funding, but we did get quite a lot of questions on that. So that's good. Did you have any further comments on that?
Look, we're providing advice on funding options, and as part of the delivery advice, We're looking at a full suite, and you know, everyone will be aware there's a number of different options around that. And yeah, look, costs obviously will be part of, you know, as the indicative business case and working out the BCR. And as I say, it's big numbers. This is the biggest, you know, transport investment by some way in New Zealand. So yeah, people can imagine what the numbers are.
Brilliant, thank you. Another one is around disruption. So there's a question here saying, what learnings from the George Street Sydney Light Rail project will you be applying to Auckland to avoid the business disruption, lengthy time and overrun litigation and cost blowouts associated with that project?
Yeah, look, we're looking to learn lessons from across a whole range of international projects and international expertise. You know, so many cities around the world have already made this move to light rail. We've got a lot to follow. In terms of disruption, you'll have seen the minister's announcement earlier this week that, you know, future big infrastructure projects are expected to compensate small businesses, and that's got to be, you know, dealt with and dealt with up front. Where we're really talking at the moment is the opportunities between the different modes to mitigate disruption. And you know, obviously, you know, tunnelling does solve some of that issue, but obviously has other impacts. As I understand it from Sydney, you know, it was the utilities and the utility diversions that was a big challenge in the contract. And you know, we are looking at or discussing. It's not so important at this stage, but it will certainly be very live in the next stage as to how we can mitigate those risks early and de-risk the project ahead of any big procurement. But that's really to be worked for. At the moment, we're really focusing on the overall sort of macro impacts and macro benefits.
Okay. Here's another one. In the previous iteration of the project, it was framed by many as a fast train to the airport, whereas it's now described as more of an urban catalyst. What's changed?
Yeah, no, look, I think you know, this is the business case and the direction of what problems are we trying to solve. And as I say, there was a lot of in the previous iterations of the project, a lot of discussion around that. I don't think it was ever sort of, you know, grounded and signed off. What we're trying to do this time and is to get that really detailed business case, really broad, show that we've done the option evaluation and show that we've done the assessment that best responds to the project objectives that I ran through. So yeah, this time we've got fairly clear objectives, and I think the big one, Claire, is that focus on urban form, on providing housing, jobs and opportunities at scale. That's the big challenge for Auckland, and the transport bit is actually just a part of that solution. So it's our contribution to the bigger issue, but that's the problem that's front of mind.
Great, thanks, Tommy. Another one, could light rail be built as light rail extensions of the existing heavy rail network, i.e. standard New Zealand gauge and electrification voltage, but allowing for steeper grades and tighter corners? Wow, that's technical.
Yeah, no, it's probably a bit too technical. We have had that question before around gauge, and we understand there is an option to have comparative gauge with our existing. What exactly that means and how that would work, and if that would provide benefits, will be something we consider downstream. But yeah, it's not we haven't closed the door to that.
Okay. Here's another one again about so Dominion Road and Sandringham Road are already congested. How would adding further traffic to either of these roads work? Would you be looking at compulsory purchase options?
Sorry, so is this about, sorry, Claire, can you just repeat that? I didn't, you broke up
so Dominion Road and Sandringham Road are already congested. How would adding further traffic to either of these roads work? Would you be looking at compulsory purchase options?
Well, look, all major infrastructure projects that are compulsory purchase. We, through the Public Works Act, lands can be purchased for transport options, and that's possible. But this scheme is really around offering transport choice, and as we said, part of the decarbonisation of Auckland's transport system. So you've got to assume that there would be significant modal shift onto this, so to reduce that congestion. Because of the capacities that light rail can carry, you can reduce the number of buses. So as I said in my intro, there's a lot of bus congestion now. So lifting it to a bigger carrying capacity allows the city to grow without the increase in congestion that would be associated if we didn't do something like this. But it is about we are looking to it is about instigating change and changing in travel patterns and travel behaviours. So that's that will change the congestion dynamic. Oh, and finally, I'd say like we're really getting an integrated transport network. So really integrating feeder service buses, heavy rail, ferries, I guess even airports. We're serving the airport. So it's all modes working together to get an integrated network.
Yeah. Gosh, we've got lots of questions here. How long do you think the design phase will be if you're looking to construct in 2 years? Again, that's probably a possibly too early question, but
no, look, I think we know. So look, we've got a broad idea, and we'll be coming to the market soon, hopefully, to map out opportunities going forward. The design phase for this and the detailed design process, it will be more than traditional transport projects that we've done in New Zealand because of that urban form. So a lot of this is about master planning these communities. These are going to be, there's going to be a big urban form, urban realm, placemaking element to this that we need to understand to give confidence to the funders that we're going to get the benefits with this. So it is a there's a lot of detailed design, not just in terms of the transport, but of the associated urban change. So it's not easy, and look, 2 years might be a bit optimistic. We've also got a lot of consenting, a lot of property to work through, and of course we're not quite clear at the moment what the consenting landscape will look like. But we're working through that. We know, and we're mapping that out in terms of opportunities, and we hope to come to the market soon with a proposal for discussion.
Okay, what are some of the key insights you've gained from the recent engagement in communities along the route, along the way?
Oh, look, it's been a fascinating. I think I say we've got a very diverse city, and we've got very diverse issues across the route, and that's so as I said, in the city, the small business voice and the disruption is very prominent, very high levels of concern, but big desire for more people to be able to access the CBD, without the parking and the other challenges of getting in and out of the CBD, and a strong desire from businesses in the CBD to see more people coming in and out. I guess there's a bit of a question post-COVID. Will people still be travelling to the city? Will people still be making that trip? And from our engagement, a very strong indication that that's still the desire. In the southern part of the route, it's life-changing opportunities. I've met people in the markets. A couple lived in South Auckland for 20 years and hadn't been to the city centre. Opportunity. We've been speaking to people that haven't, wanted to go to university, but actually the difficulty of travelling across every day was prohibitive. So, very strong support for the scheme and for the concept and the opportunities that it will bring, and the lifting of job access, the number of jobs within 45-minute commute. It gets very exciting when you see and when you're talking to those people that will actually whose life it will change. Yeah, lots of other points and concerns, lots of ideas and good opportunities. As I think I said in the direction that what was quite surprised me was the strength of feeling about bringing light rail right into the heart of those communities and using it as this catalyst for development. That was overwhelming support for that.
So Claire, I just wonder whether I could just add to it. So if we take, for example, Mangere, local gentrification is an issue. So when you reshape the town as a result of this investment, concern amongst Polynesian community about gentrification. They've already been displaced out of Greylin and Ponsonby years ago. In fact, a lot of their churches are still there, and one of the challenges they have is actually on a Sunday how you can reconnect from Mangere through to Greylin and Ponsonby. So, but gentrification, so how that's handled in the next stages going through of how you actually allow for them to retain their community, to stay in their community, desire for the route to go through to the town centre, accessibility to Onehunga, and so we can through this consultation, through this engagement, we've got a whole lot of information from different communities. So if, for example, you're in Dominion Road, Sandringham, there's quite concern about heritage housing, which is protected under the unitary plan. So how do we handle that if there's going to be intensification around that, and obviously disruption from Dominion Road businesses, etc. So we have a very good handle after a lot of engagement, a lot of feedback of the key issues along the route.
Great, thank you, Lee. Cheers. The next one, gosh, there's so many coming in. I'm trying to pick one that's, that we haven't answered. Transport needs to be decarbonised. That includes in construction. How is the embodied carbon and climate change implications calculated in the business case?
I can't give you the details around the modelling, but you're absolutely right. The embedded carbon and the ongoing carbon need to be worked through. And clearly, there is big difference between the different options in terms of the embedded carbon, with the tunnelling options, obviously taking a lot more concrete and steel. So you get this sort of big lump at the front, and then you look at them over the years of operation, so over 50 years, and have to sum up the benefits. So I'm sorry I can't say exactly how the model, but I can assure you that it does cover, well, it covers embedded carbon, the ongoing carbon reduction, and also we've tried to capture the difference in carbon of the land use. So bringing more dwellings into brownfield, inner urban areas does have a carbon dividend over greenfield, and we try to calculate that as well. So yeah, it's absolutely key and going to be part of all our business cases going forward. So we've got to get good at that modelling and predicting.
There's a lot of questions around procurement and the next steps there. So I'm not sure who would maybe want to answer one of those questions.
Oh, look, yeah. So we part of the advice we're giving is around the delivery entity and the organisation, and how the organisation, or which organisation, takes this forward. But we are also mapping out a program to try and maintain momentum on the project and keep building on the work that we've done. Projects stalled in the past, so we were looking for a detailed business case, that master planning capability that I was talking about, and consenting and property strategies, which would be the next phase. And we'll be looking to come to the market with a proposal around procurement for that soon, or not too distant future. In terms of overall procurement for the major works, I mean, that's still a longer term. Again, we've done some thinking around that, and we're forming that, but that decision won't be made for a while yet. There's still a lot of work to be done in terms of understanding the form of procurement for the physical works.
Okay, great. Thanks, Tommy. This might be a question for Amanda, but the urban uplift you're discussing would require moving away from the status quo. What kind of interventions would be needed to maximise that objective?
Yeah, so it's a really good point. The accessibility benefits we know alone in terms of what light rail will give won't be enough. They will give some benefit to uplift, but in order to maximise the investment, we need to do a lot more. So the kinds of things that we would need to do fundamentally is, as Tommy already mentioned, master planning, and then translating that to understanding what changes need to be undertaken to the Auckland Unitary Plan and how far we go in terms of that. There's already been a significant amount of uplift across the city and in this corridor, but we need to make sure that the enabled capacity is in the right locations across the corridor. So that is a fundamental, I guess, planning intervention. There are other things that we'll need to do, and that includes things like around land assembly. A lot of the corridor is quite fragmented in land ownership. So clearly we're going to need to understand, how much land amalgamation there is. We need to partner. A whole of government approach is critical to delivering the successful outcomes. As many will know, Kainga Ora is already active in Mangere and Mount Roskill in the corridor. So it's about leveraging those opportunities as well, and understanding what we need to do to make places market attractive. So it might include investment in placemaking. Those are just some of the interventions.
Okay, this might be a question for Lee, but how or will a change of government influence the project scope and outcomes?
I'm not sure I can answer. I'm not sure I can answer that, but quite clearly, and can I say I started my career with an offer from New Zealand Rail, or the equivalent, back in 1975 when I left university. That was my first job offer. I actually never started it because the undergrounding of central Auckland never proceeded. So I'm conscious that governments can come and governments can go. All I can say is that it's likely that this project will be fairly well advanced by the next election period. I guess it's a matter for the community and the New Zealand society to determine whether it wants to, if in fact, change the government that this project proceeded.
Great, thank you. It's another question. Have you considered extending light rail from the airport to Puhunui station? Connects light rail and heavy modes?
Yes, that's been looked at, and look, obviously the Puhunui connection is new services is up and running. It does have trade-offs that it's slightly further journey time versus benefits. So yes, it is that has been included in the analysis.
Right, here's another one around governance. Does the Auckland Rail Establishment Unit find it challenging to report to this many different entities with potentially varying interests?
I'd have to say that this entity is actually excellent in terms of being able to pick up the voice of the Auckland Council as well as that of central government. Look, I've sat on a number of boards, and I have to say this one has worked very well indeed in terms of that interplay of getting those voices from, whether it's Auckland Transport, whether it's from Kainga Ora, whether it's from Ministry of Transport around the room. We've been able to resolve, a number of issues, in fact all of the issues by that forum. So it may not be a classical board forum, but actually I think it works really well. I think it's critical thinking forward of what that entity might look like, of how it's actually designed. What is really critical because of the urban nature of and the urban components of this, that it actually probably that entity reflects those dynamics as well. So quick answer, it's working well. I have the voice of, can I say, I didn't mention before, but Treasury are observers around that board, and they're full participants in this process. So quite clearly they're key parts in this. You know, from a governance point of view, I keep in contact as a chair with them on a weekly, fortnightly basis to make sure that we get an integrated approach to decision making.
Great, thanks, Lee. How are future connections beyond this project being considered?
So as I said, Claire, the connections to the north and to the northwest are important, and we've been very clear from the start we're not going to preclude options there. It does get quite complex in the engineering firm, engineering context, through the centre, where you can't have all three lines converging in the CBD at grade. That doesn't work. So at some stage you're going to have to grade separate from them. So we've been looking at options as to how that works, and we'll advise on that. Also, you have to consider the capacity, so there'll be greater capacity when that connects through to the other lines, and that's been factored in our forecast and in our routes. So I'd say, you know, if our brief was to not preclude, we're probably doing slightly more than that, and just sort of looking to, you know, see where, you know, enable and what is the right sequencing of works, but looking very much at that long term, that full ATAP strategy, where they'll work together, so that we can do that future planning at this stage.
Great, thank you. Both ends of the route, so Wynyard Quarter and the airport, are vulnerable to the sea level rise of 1 metre, now considering likely by the end of the century. How is this being factored into the planning for investment in the light rail network?
Look, I think it's fair to say it hasn't been, you know, we're sort of assuming that you know, that can be engineered, and in the detailed design phase, we don't see it as a you know, a showstopper or a differentiator between the different routes and modes that we're considering at the moment. So at IBC level, I think that's not, you know, I'm not saying it's an invalid point. I'm just saying I think, you know, we can deal with that in a more detailed level further down.
What implications will this project have for Maori interests?
Yeah, so we are in a process in the IBC of informing and engagement with the view to recommending through the indicative business case for active involvement for iwi in the second stage, and we're giving advice to the minister through that process. I am personally fronting hui with each of the chairs of 15 of the 19 iwi in Auckland. I think I've had with the Māori team within the unit, I think we've had 12 of the 15 hui to date. So that is picking up, you know, the different, and I have to say diverse interests of iwi into that process. But I can assure you that this will be a key part of the indicative business case advice to the Crown.
Okay. Are you including cycle lanes along the corridor and connecting the new stations?
Yes, absolutely. Active modes is part of the integrated transport network, and a lot of consideration has been given not just along the corridors but in the catchments, and in the work that Amanda's been leading around the urban form, how that urban form is done in a way that provides access to the stations, walking, cycling, and electric scooters, etc., is very much in the thinking.
Okay. Not sure if you'd be able to answer this because you might not have detailed knowledge, but will the resource management reform proposal to remove amenity from the RMA help this project? That's maybe a little bit too.
Yeah, no.
Amanda might be able to help Claire.
Oh, yeah, I think you're right. It's probably a bit too early to make a call on that. Yeah.
Yeah, no, that's cool. We'll probably just do the final question. What will industry market engagement look like in the next phase of this project?
Yeah, that's a good question. I think Bill's is saying that we plan to undertake it. I can't give much more detail than that at this stage. Yeah, no, we would like to, we need to sort of understand, get through this phase, get the route and mode and shape of the project more defined before scoping out what the market engagement will be. But yeah, look, we know that there's going to be pressure on resources, pressure on capability globally around the skills that we need. So we are going to need to know and understand the market very, very well and do full and detailed engagement. I'm sorry, at this stage I can't say exactly what that will look like.
That's great. Well, thank you, and thank you for answering all those questions. We did get quite a lot in, and I hope I've answered the majority of them that have come through, or at least the themes. So thank you for that, and thanks for people sending those through on the Slido. I'll now introduce Robert and Lauren. So Robert Angus is Aurecon's Global Light Rail Lead, responsible for the pursuit and delivery of Aurecon's portfolio of light rail projects. He has led the planning, feasibility and design of several major light rail projects, including Newcastle, Parramatta and Sydney's light rail. And Lauren is an economist who specialises in infrastructure strategy. She supported the business case development for both Canberra and Adelaide Light Rail and currently sits on the project steering committee for the D&C phase of Parramatta Light Rail. Lauren is Aurecon's Australian and New Zealand's precinct industry director, responsible for supporting government and private sector clients to unlock the benefits of place through visioning, design and planning for large infrastructure projects. Great, thank you. I'll pass over to you.
Thanks, Claire. It's exciting to see what's taking shape for Auckland with the opportunity for light rail to support urban transformation. Across the ditch, we've seen that transport has been significantly disrupted by COVID, but we know that we will get back to a new normal. I think many of us now are appreciating our local communities and seeing the value in 20-minute neighbourhoods in perhaps a way that we haven't before. And I think the concept of 15 to 20-minute neighbourhoods encourages walking and cycling, and light rail is a great complement to more active and sustainable transport choices. It's also really important to understand the unique demographic makeup of the communities alongside the future corridors in order to fully understand how their lifestyle influences their transport choices. Next slide, please, Rob. We know that transport is an important part of city shaping, and the attractiveness of cities as a place to live, to do business, depends on the quality of our public transport, as well as how well it integrates with the rest of the transport network. We saw that recently in Sydney when Google chose not to invest as an anchor tenant in the Bays precinct because it wasn't being well served by public transport. We know that transport networks, as you've heard earlier, are the backbone of our cities, and we are becoming increasingly aware that transport access is crucial for the economy, particularly if you're planning to reshape cities in a post-COVID world. Investing in light rail has the ability to shape new communities, connect really great places, and help both locals and visitors alike move around and explore what Auckland has to offer. High capacity and reliable services can really open up great urban renewal opportunities. And I think beyond the focus on the transport connections, light rail really does have an ability to change the way that we think about place and the communities that it serves. To fully leverage the value of the investment that we're making in light rail, I think we've heard that it's really important to think about master planning our communities, thinking about rezoning to support housing and local employment growth, as well as looking at the other types of infrastructure and services that are going to be required to meet the future needs of those particular locations. I think we've got a unique opportunity to take a place-first approach and create great places to live, work and play. We know there's significant economic benefits to light rail, particularly around the land use activation. We know it can be a catalyst for urban renewal and regeneration. And as you heard from Amanda, the investment in the permanent infrastructure creates a lot more certainty for both the community and for local businesses, helping to encourage that investment in property development and urban renewal. It helps drive increases in land value, particularly in those lower density areas where we might be providing better public transport access and better transport choices. Light rail also has a higher user experience, which increases people's willingness to use it, creating both demand for housing and for access to businesses along the corridors. To really capture the benefits of light rail, it's important to have an appropriate business case and appraisal framework in place, one that considers the value and the impact on place and not just on movement. Transport for New South Wales has made some really good progress in this space in recent years with the development of the movement and place framework, which is about making sure that we're getting the right mix of transport in the right locations to create those attractive places and spaces for people that they're actually able to enjoy. Next slide, please, Rob. One quick example, if we can get it to pop up, is Fisherman's Bend in Melbourne, which is a really interesting example of a differentiated focus on urban renewal. The business case focused both on the value that could be created by the urban renewal components of the project, as well as the value capture mechanisms that could be applied to generate a larger funding envelope. Fisherman's Bend is one of the largest urban renewal sites in Australia and poses a really significant opportunity to improve the economy and to maintain Melbourne's reputation as a livable city. The project focused on the value that could be created by leveraging the opportunities around livability, increased business activity, sustainability, accessibility, and importantly, the integration with walking and cycling and other public transport services. The Fisherman's Bend framework included the assessment of well-serviced medium and high density housing options for about 80,000 people, as well as looking at a diverse mix of uses and activities, public amenity and green space as well. There was a considered focus on the agglomeration of business activity and that attraction of high value and innovative businesses that would drive greater economic value for the precinct. Fisherman's Bend will be the largest urban renewal Green Star community in Australia with a focus on energy efficient design and renewable energy. There was also a high degree of focus on the value created by connecting light rail with walking and cycling and other public transport options, which is helping to provide communities with more accessible and sustainable transport options. The value capture mechanisms, these are helping to create a more fair and equitable system by ensuring that those who directly benefit from the infrastructure are able to contribute to its cost. And this reduces the reliance on government as the sole funding source and also helps to drive a higher quality infrastructure and amenity. Thinking both early about the value creation for the project and the opportunities for value capture has helped create a much more robust business case, as well as the ability to realise the vision for urban transformation. Rob, do you want to take us through a couple more of the Sydney projects?
Sure, thank you, Lauren. Look, across the Tasman Sea, the light rail renaissance has been realised in Australia since the early 2000s. Auckland's been involved in and active on almost every light rail project in Australia. These projects you see are a sample of our light rail pedigree with our involvement in planning, business case support, feasibility, optioneering, right through design, construction, and through to revenue service. But if we turn our minds to project implementation, what about the impact of disruption? Disruption really is only heartfelt when the end is unknown. I think about COVID a bit these days. This is an image of Parramatta Light Rail under construction from earlier this year. It's an area looking towards Eat Street, which is now a pedestrianised precinct in place, benefiting the loved area of shopping and dining as a precinct. If I take my eyes off the technical design of the stone sets that you see being laid and the importance of encapsulating rail boot, I also think about the retail businesses along this section of the corridor. And Transport for New South Wales has shown great leadership to build from lessons learned on similar projects plan for local businesses. It's not simply a matter of handing out payments. Think about some of the businesses in this environment. They're small and they've got challenging operational cash flows. So Transport for New South Wales initiated business impact assessments and business activation plans. What does this mean? It means community activities. It means retail incentivisation, shop local campaigns, pop-ups, public domain installations. But from my understanding, what was valued most was the free business advisory services. So for these small businesses, so one-on-one financial and business mentoring and opportunities such as online and product diversification, and enacting this well before any impact actually took place on site. And when I think about corridor revitalisation, Newcastle's introduction of light rail was paramount to opening up their CBD to the waterfront. This was particularly evident through the removal of heavy rail and delivering the first wire-free system along its entire route in Australasia. But the question is, when you're in the early stages of a business case, how do you communicate transformative vision like this? We'd like to finish by sharing an example of how Aurecon's Unsigned Studio successfully communicated this transformative impact that Newcastle's revitalisation would have on their community.
Newcastle's a great place.
And I just love this place to turn back into the glory days of what the Newcastle CBD was.
I think we'd like to see more live music events in that area, on the foreshore or in some of the parks there, because I know every time we go in there, we're looking for things to do, but there's not very much happening.
We've got all these beautiful views and the heritage. If we can work with that and come up with clever ways to get families playing outside, then there's much more hope than I'd feared.
Light rail and bicycle infrastructure and walking is what this city needs, in my view.
Everywhere where they put light rail, we're seeing business boom and we've seen the area develop and actually become a much more efficient city.
By linking the old city directly with the harbour would be a huge asset and encourage the free flow of people backwards and forwards.
The whole area all the way down to the car park and across the Civic Theatre could be nice open space with lots of gardens.
And allow the uni students to come in the open space in the sunshine and study. Also, I'd like to see it developed for families, so it could be dual purpose for the uni students throughout the week and then families on the weekend.
People are excited about it. They can sort of smell it in the air and they know it's close.
The business community now sees something happening and progressing, and that means we can employ more people, we can employ more young people. That's what we want.
We hope to have strong job opportunities so that we can stay here in the future.
Just needs that infrastructure behind it with transport and making sure it's still a safe and community orientated place.
It's been dormant for long enough, it's time for change.
Great, thank you, and thanks everyone for coming this evening. We've nearly wrapped this event up. I just want to thank the speakers and the panel tonight for being involved and all your questions that you sent through from the members. Also, I just want to give a little bit of a plug to our Building Nations conference. It's now changed date to the 16th to the 19th of November. We're now doing it across 4 days and we're delivering that virtually. But I hope that it's going to be a really great event and I'm hoping to see you all there. So thanks for coming tonight. It's been a long night, but it's been a worthwhile night. So thanks again. Cheers. Bye-bye.